What's up, everybody? Happy Sunday. Michaela Vernava alongside Zach Cox in the Nesson Studios. The New England Patriots out in Mexico City. Exciting stuff. Matchup today, this afternoon, rather, in Mexico City. Our Doug Kyde is out there, so we'll be hearing from him later on in the show. But Zach, let's just start here, breaking down this game. It should be interesting. I mean, just even in the fact that they're playing in Mexico.
Yeah, this is the second year in a row that the Oakland Raiders have played down in Mexico. They played there against the Houston Texans last year. Patriots first time down there since 1998, which they played the Cowboys in a preseason game back then. First regular season game for them in Mexico. I believe it's the third regular season game for them outside of the United States because they had those two London games a couple years ago. But yeah, it's exciting. I mean, from everything we're hearing about, everything we're hearing out of Mexico City, they apparently have a pretty sizable contingent of Patriots fans down there. So should be a great crowd, and they obviously love the Raiders down there too. So it should be an electric atmosphere down there.
I wouldn't imagine that this is necessarily a location where Patriots fans are traveling to, say Patriots fans from around here. But I know that Tom Brady did say he was hoping for a lot of support down there. So do you think that just a lot of the people who live down there happen to be Patriots fans? I don't know. I'm wondering how that works. If you're from another country, how do you pick your favorite team?
That's what it seems like. I mean, I feel like the teams here that are more successful have bigger fan bases outside of the country, just because they're the ones that you see on TV more often. That's from what we're hearing. It's back in the day, a lot of it was a big Cowboys contingent, a lot of Raiders, a lot of Steelers, a lot of Dolphins, like the teams that were traditionally good back in the 70s and 80s. And then recently the Patriots have kind of risen up those ranks too, just because they've been so dominant. And I mean, if you're new to a sport, if you say, hey, I want to check out football, which team should I root for? Might as well root for the team that's won 5 championships in the last 15 years.
Yeah, going with the 40-year-old guy who's defying time and just getting better as he ages, and like you said, just
successful,
racking up championships left and right.
Success,
yeah, definitely a good to get the Patriots down there in terms of spreading the sport. But as for this game, as you said, the Raiders have played there recently, whereas the Patriots have not. But the Pats, of course, we talked about this earlier this week, have been out in Colorado Springs all week long. The elevation in Mexico City even higher than Denver, which is a place where the Patriots struggle sometimes, or historically have struggled, not necessarily because of the altitude, but they have had a chance to acclimate to higher elevation, not quite as high as Mexico City, but being out in Colorado Springs seems like a really smart move by Bill Belichick to get his team out there and acclimated to that. Because you hear even reporters' accounts of when they go out there and just kind of you get dizzy from the altitude. I mean, I've never experienced it, I've never been out there, but how much do you think that'll play into this?
I mean, it seems like a smart move for the Patriots for a number of reasons. One, they always like to do that kind of team building away from, it's almost like a week of summer camp or something. Like you completely eliminate all the distractions of being at home and family life and all those non-football things. And obviously the schedule doesn't really work out that way. Every year there's not always an opportunity to do it. Last year I don't believe they did anything, but back in 2014 they did something similar where they stayed in San Diego for a week just to kind of just to get away for a little bit, just to focus their minds in. And it really it worked out well for them. I mean, they basically went on the tear the rest of the season and won the Super Bowl. Now, who knows if this will have a similar effect, but it also has, like you said, the altitude effect, because Colorado Springs is actually even higher than Mile High. It's right between Mile High and what they're going to be experiencing today in Mexico City. So it's definitely good for players to kind of spend a week just in that atmosphere. I mean, even that I don't think is going to fully prepare them for Mexico, because from what we hear, the air quality down there isn't all that great either. So you've got a high elevation plus the kind of smoggy, smoky air. Not really the greatest environment for doing extreme athletic activities, but definitely a good idea for them to, I think, just get acclimated. And the Raiders took a different approach, even though they did play down there last year. Jack Del Rio kept them in Oakland all week. They just said, this is what we're going to do. We're going to stick to our normal schedule. I believe they flew in either Friday or Saturday down to Mexico City. So two very different approaches, and we'll see which one kind of leads to a more fit team this game.
Yeah, it does seem like the elements could play a part in this game, so that should be something to keep an eye on. Players on the sidelines, if anyone's struggling. And as for the distractions, it sounds like Tom Brady might be in the doghouse a little bit when he gets home, because of one of the quotes he had to reporters when he apologized to Giselle after he said, I'm not at home, I'm not with my kids, I don't have someone telling me what to do. And then he said, oh, sorry, I didn't mean that. So it was a funny little slip up. But as for, But as for eliminating distractions, I feel like not only for acclimating to the elements for this game, I feel like in this season in particular, that week away could be a really good thing for this team. That early on in the season, we talked at length about how just things felt a little different. They just weren't seeming to gel, especially defensively. We have seen them improve defensively, but I feel like just getting that Patriot camaraderie going could be good, that they did have a chance to be away but together.
Yeah, I mean, for a team that had so many communication issues early in the season, now we haven't seen those kind of issues in a couple of weeks now, really since week 4, since during their 5-game win streak. They've seemed pretty good from that regard, but they are implementing some new guys back into the defense, especially with Stephon Gilmore coming back last week. We might see Eric Rowe today. There are some players that have been out for a little while that might come back in. So yeah, I mean, if you can spend a full week basically just focusing on nothing but football, it can only help your team.
Stephon Gilmore's first game back from that concussion where he was out several weeks. It was a promising performance back. I was certainly impressed. He did rack up another penalty. That's been an issue for him all season. But what do you think they'll try to do with him in this game? Do you think they'll diversify how they use him just to continue, I guess, that momentum that he was able to come out hot in his first game back last week?
I think they're going to have to use a different strategy than they did last week, because the Raiders don't really have their receivers aren't like what we saw with the Broncos, and even what we saw earlier in the season with the Buccaneers, where they had one kind of big, strong receiver that the Patriots could stick Stephon Gilmore on, and then a smaller, quicker guy that they could have Malcolm Butler shadow for most of the game. Really, Michael Crabtree and Amani Cooper are pretty much the exact same size. Cooper's a little bit faster, but they're pretty similar players. It's not a big guy and a little guy. So I think they're going to have to diversify the coverage a little bit. I think they'll be able to. I think that although those players are both talented, Cooper has been ridiculously inconsistent this year. I mean, he had the game against the Chiefs where he had 210 receiving yards and 2 or 3 touchdowns. Other than that, he's basically been kind of a complete wild card. He's had a couple games where he's had fewer than 10 receiving yards total, so he isn't having the greatest season. Derek Carr playing pretty well, but not playing up to the MVP level that he had last year. I still give the edge here to the Patriots, but they are going to have to use a different strategy, and I'm pretty intrigued to see what they come out with.
What's your assessment of Derek Carr and his ability to test this Patriots defense? Because I feel like their secondary needs a good test against a good quarterback. I said that Gilmore did well last week against the Broncos, but consider that is the Broncos offense that had Brock Osweiler in there. So how much of a test do you think Carr will be?
I mean, it's going to be a test. With the way that the Patriots have played this season, even in the games that they've won, I mean, Josh McCown has looked pretty good against them. Even Brock Osweiler, for a lot of that game, didn't look that bad. I mean, take away some of those special teams miscues on the Broncos' part, and that game is a lot closer. So they haven't really taken a quarterback and just completely shut him down. Even quarterbacks like McCown and Osweiler, who are nowhere near superstars. And Derek Carr is a step up from them, and he does have some talented weapons. I mean, in Crabtree and Cooper and Jared Cook, their tight end, is really having a great season. He had a great game against the Miami Dolphins a couple weeks ago. So they do have the weapons to push this Patriots defense. I'm expecting a little bit of a higher scoring game than we've seen in recent weeks. The Patriots haven't given up more than 17 points since that Week 4 loss to the Carolina Panthers at home. So the defense has been tremendous at keeping opponents out of the end zone lately, but they still do that Patriot thing. I mean, they're back to the bend but don't break defense that we've seen for seems like a decade now in New England. So I do think that the Raiders are going to put some points on the board against them, but I don't think their defense is going to be talented enough to stop Tom Brady.
All right, well, let's look at the other side of the ball and Tom Brady, specifically his protection. They are missing a few guys up front on the O-line, and we saw without Marcus Cannon, the O-line did do well against Von Miller and the Broncos defense, but what challenges do they face this week? Yeah,
now they have David Andrews out. David Andrews, their center, who started every single game since the beginning of last season, played pretty much every snap. I believe the only snaps that he's missed were at the end of last game when they basically just pulled him in garbage time to get Ted Karras some work. And now Ted Karras is going to have to start in this spot. He's either going to play center for David Andrews or he's going to start at right guard and move Joe Thuney to center. They can really, both of those guys have the ability to play either position. If I were them, I think I would probably start Karras just so you're not losing two starters rather than one. But, I mean, Ladrian Waddle's played pretty well in relief of Marcus Cannon. But this is a pretty talented defensive front from the Raiders, rather. even though they haven't been particularly productive. I mean, I think they're second to last, or they might even be tied for last in the NFL in sacks. But they have Khalil Mack, they have Bruce Irvin, they have some talented players up there. And since the Patriots aren't really going to be at full strength on that offensive line, I think that's going to be a much bigger challenge than it would be if they did have that full starting five in there. And
an interesting bit, I know you wrote about this, there will be a Massachusetts guy covering Rob Gronkowski. Yep. Tell us about that.
Obi Melifonwu, yeah, he's from Grafton, Mass. He grew up a Patriots fan. I believe he was 7 years old or something like that when they won their first Super Bowl. So he had a pretty good childhood, sports fandom-wise. Went on to UConn. He's a safety, but he's 6'4", I believe, like 240. He's a huge safety. He's ridiculously athletic. He's the kind of guy I guess you would want, the kind of body type at least you would want covering someone like Rob Gronkowski. But he has basically no NFL experience. I mean, began the season on injured reserve. He's a rookie, so made his debut 2 weeks ago against the Miami Dolphins. Only played 7 snaps in that game. So he has 7 career NFL snaps under his belt, and he's going to be going up against probably the best tight end in the NFL, if not the best tight end in NFL history. So that's a massive, massive test for him. And, I mean, even if he can kind of limit Gronk, which not a lot of players are able to do, this Raiders secondary is really bad. I mean, this is one of the worst secondaries in all of football. I believe the opposing quarterbacks have a 110 passer rating against them, and since 2008, only one team has allowed a passer rating over 110 in a full season. That was the New Orleans Saints a couple years ago, who have also been a traditionally terrible defense until this season. So I think Tom Brady could have his most productive game of the season here, really. Just with the cornerbacks and the safeties he's going up against, plus all the weapons he still has, even with Chris Hogan out. I think this could be another big, high-scoring game for the Patriots offense.
Sounds like it could be quite a game for the self-proclaimed Yo Soy Fiesta, Rob Gronkowski. Did you see that? I think it was the Patriots that put out a message of Gronk speaking Spanish, which I would be willing to go out on a limb and say that he's not fluent, but I have to commend him on.
He tries.
Yeah, he did try. I think he was reading off a prompter, but that's okay. He sent a nice message out to the fans in Mexico, which was cool. It just was funny because the old.
I went back and watched the original Yo Soy Fiesta clip this week for the first time in forever, and it was. I recommend you do the same. It's hilarious. It's so funny. It's like immediately after, I think, the 2011 AFC Championship game, is interviewed by John Sutcliffe, and he's just deer in the headlights the whole time, but he's so passionate about it. He's like, all right, let's go. We're speaking Spanish. It's hilarious. It's Pete Gronk.
Good stuff. As far as the red zone issues that have persisted this season for the Patriots offense, do you expect that to be able to pick up and maybe be able to solve some of those today? I
mean, on paper, it should improve. I mean, you're going up against a secondary that, like I just said, is not particularly good. And now you're adding Martellus Bennett to the mix, who, even though he has been limited in practice this week with an injury, we should theoretically see him play a larger role this week than he did last week when he played only 7 snaps against the Broncos. He's a big-time red zone threat. Rob Gronkowski, who we just talked about, big-time red zone threat. I think this could be a game where the Patriots kind of continue their upward trend, because they were actually pretty good in the red zone against the Broncos last week. I think this could give them some more confidence here today.
All right, well, let's send it now to Doug Kyde, who is in Mexico City.
Thanks, guys. I'm here at Estadio Azteca, and it has been a wild week here for the media, for the players, and if they're anywhere as near as tired as I am, this game could be a little sloppy out there, and the Raiders were able to actually stay in Oakland for the week before they came out here to Mexico City. Patriots has been a much different story. They played in Denver last Sunday. They actually flew to Denver on Friday before the Sunday game. Then they drove straight from Denver to Colorado Springs, where they practiced at Air Force for the week. They stayed in Colorado Springs there. Then on Saturday, they flew here to Mexico City, where they've been staying. They arrived about the same time that we did, about 3 hours before the game. And it is very tiring here. The altitude is pretty crazy. We're 7,200 feet above sea level. It can be tough to breathe once you start moving around too much. Just a personal anecdote. Getting on the field here was a gigantic struggle. I think I looped this entire stadium about 5 times. I was walking around for about an hour. I'm out of breath. I can only imagine how the players will be feeling after a 3-hour game here. But Patriots seem to match up pretty well here with the Oakland Raiders. It seems like Patriots defensive tackle Malcolm Brown will not be playing. That means that Marshawn Lynch actually could go off a little bit. Broncos had some success against the run last week while Malcolm Brown was out. So despite the fact that Malcolm Brown did practice all week for the Patriots, he was warming up with practice squad players. Looks like he probably won't play. Looks like Eric Rowe probably won't play. But Patriots are pretty stacked there at cornerback. They're doing better as far as depth at defensive tackle. They've got Ricky Jean-Francois, they've got Alan Branch, they've got Lawrence Guy, they've got Adam Butler, the rookie. So those guys will certainly have to step up against Marshawn Lynch. And Alan Branch said this week at Air Force that he really ups his game when he's playing against a guy like Marshawn Lynch, just because they've both been in the league so long. They're known to be, or Marshawn Lynch is known to be such a good player. Patriots have not played Marshawn Lynch since Super Bowl 49 when he was, when the Seahawks chose not to run for the 1 yard line when Malcolm Brown picked off that ball. So Marshawn Lynch might still be feeling a little bit salty about that play, about that game, about not getting the ball. So he might be extra motivated in this game. So it's definitely going to be Alan Branch who has to step up. But Patriots cornerbacks also will certainly have to step up against the Oakland Raiders wide receivers. I don't think it's an obvious game where you play matchups in this game. I think that Michael Crabtree and Amari Cooper are just too similar of players where you stick one guy on the other in this game. I think they'll probably just play sides, maybe they'll play some zone. That means that there's going to be some communication for Stephon Gilmore. So this really will be his first communication test since he came back from his concussion. I will send it back to you guys. This atmosphere is going to be crazy. It's a wonderful stadium. It's an old stadium. It's a great city. It's been a lot of fun this past week, but I am ready to get back home to Foxborough, to Watertown, to see everyone at Nesson, to see everyone at home, to see my family, because it has been a long week out here in Denver, Colorado Springs, and Mexico City.
All right, good stuff. Thanks, Doug. Zach, any final thoughts before we sign off here?
Yeah, kind of like I was saying earlier, I'm expecting a pretty high-scoring game. I'm expecting a wild crowd, too. I'm very excited to see what this Estadio Azteca looks like with another football game. And it was pretty rowdy last year for Raiders-Texans, so I think they should have a good crowd, a good atmosphere, and a pretty good game today.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the crowd as well. And we will have wall-to-wall coverage right here on Nesson.com, so make sure to keep it here throughout the game and post-game, and we'll talk to you later.